In today's video, we are going to check out the things we learnt from Chelsea 1, Real Madrid 2. Again, as always, we're going to look at the tactical tendencies within this game, a few standout performers. We're going to speak a lot about Enzo Fernandez and his role in this team today, and just talk about a few things that we saw from the game. Let me know what you made of that game down below, and let's get into it. This was the starting lineup that we had from this game, so a little bit different in a few ways. We had Colwill starting at right centre-back, so he would become the central centre-back when turning to that 3-2-4-1 in possession. Gusto still inverting from that left-back position alongside Lavia in that double pivot. This time we got to see Enzo as that left centre-mid with Nkunku as that right centre-mid. Enzo dropping a little bit deeper, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Then we had Sterling and Madueke back on the wings after they came on at half-time against Man City, starting this game with Mark Guéhi up front. And we also got to see Jorgensen's first game from the start rather than coming off the bench. Just to go over the basics again, we still saw this sort of 4-2 build-up in deep possession with Sanchez becoming one of the centre-backs. As you can see, Reece, Badiashile, or Colwill, Sanchez, then Badiashile, with the two pivot of Lavia, Gusto, and the two eights in between the lines to receive the ball, and Nkunku and Enzo. Then, of course, we still saw that 3-2 base shape higher up the pitch. As you can see here, I've put like a faint arrow so that it's seeing a line-breaking pass into Enzo's feet, which is all zigzagged across that top five, so at staggered heights. You've got the two eights slightly deeper than the striker, of course, and then the wingers pinning the fullbacks back. So as you can see here, that created that nice 5v5 against the back line and straight into Enzo's feet, where he can turn and be dangerous on the ball. Still forming that two pivot of Gusto and Lavia. I'm liking the little one touches that we're seeing between them in the middle of the park, those little combinations. We saw a few times where they staggered that pivot height, again drops it off to Lavia, and then Gusto makes a little run in between the gap. Lavia has the quality and confidence to find him, and then from there Gusto can drive forward and make something happen. Now, something else that we saw, which I noted down as very De Zerbi-esque, is the exact notes that I wrote for this, was sort of that 4-2 build-up from deep, but without the goalkeeper involved. So the goalkeeper's there. If you was to actually have the goalkeeper involved, it would actually read out as a 3-4 build-up. And then it sort of leaves that front four as your outlet players. So you're essentially playing a 3-4-4. We saw this a few times where Enzo would then drop in, and that ability for him to then pick up the ball and be part of that build-up. And then you've also got those two deep players. So in this instance, the striker is actually dropping all the way in deep as well. The two wingers are staying nice and high. And it's a way of dragging out their opposition defenders and sort of creating those overloads in and around the middle of the pitch, as well as leaving those 1v1 wingers isolated for when that ball does get out to them. Now, I wanted to speak about Enzo Fernandez in a little more detail today because we've been seeing him a lot as that number 8, and as much as I want to see him as that number 6, I did point out in my last few videos and streams why I think he can play as that number 8 and the sort of impact he can have from that role in this system. This was probably Enzo Fernandez's most impactful game in pre-season under Enzo Maresca, albeit there's only been a few, but him dropping into that sort of deep creative pocket, that sort of left creative pocket, which I think he's better on that left side than from the right, to create in that sort of cruise role, as I like to call it. He was dropping in, again, on that axis between the wide centre-back and the winger, which is Badiashile and Sterling. You can see that with the yellow line there. And he just had his best game. He got an assist, again, from sort of a left half-space area. He was dropping into these spaces here to receive the ball, almost as a left-back at times. And again, it allows Chelsea to progress play with that extra one man. If the player follows him out there, then he's also drawing an opposition away from the centre of the pitch, and he's leaving space for others to occupy. But if they don't follow him, it allows him to get on the ball, pick his head up, and then he can start to pick passes, which is what he is absolutely unbelievable at. As you can see in this image here, I've just sort of marked it so you can see that he's basically occupying that left-back role. If you was to put it together as a 4-2 base, Enzo's at left-back, and then you've got the two pivot in the middle of the pitch, which is Gusto and Lavia, and then, of course, as well, Jorgensen behind the ball. So again, you could call that a 3-4 with Enzo basically occupying that left-back spot. Now let's take a look at the more pressing issue, or at least what people are making out to be the most pressing issue, which is, of course, the high line. And this is just a little snippet of what Maresca said about the high line, saying it's more of a habit right now. It's not something that the team is working on actively in training. It's a habit from the last few years, or last year particularly. And last year, we already conceded many goals from this problem, he stated. So this is something he believes is imprinted in the players and is not what he's trying to teach them how to do within his system. Now, whilst a few of these images flick through, I just want you to try and think about what the actual emphasis of this strategy is and what we're trying to make the opposition team do. The idea of going man-to-man in these scenarios is, of course, to make them go long so that we can then deal with that ball going long. You're chancing that we're going to deal with that ball long and that we're going to have enough to deal with that so that we can then regain possession quicker and then continue to dominate the game with control of the ball. However, here was an example early on of two players getting in a muddle. Madueke, of course, he's trying to keep an eye on that man on his outside, so Reece is then attached to Vinicius Jr., who then ends up dropping in deep to try and receive the ball. Reece follows him, and then he spins off his man in behind. Colwill, luckily, is close enough to then make the recovery challenge, but he should probably be a few steps over, ready to recover. He should be watching for that if he knows that Reece is going to jump out. One of the main issues, and Maresca has pointed this out himself as well, is that when there is not pressure on the ball, so in this scenario, Rudiger has time to look up and pick a pass. When there's no pressure on the ball, this is when the defensive line should not be stepping out. Because as you can see here, Colwill has looked to step out, Rudiger has time to pick a pass, and he's now got that space in behind where Colwill is now out of position. So him stepping up at this moment is the wrong moment to make that step out of that back line. Here's an example where Chelsea were actually sat a little bit deeper in that 4-4-2 block. As you can see, there's a midfielder free behind that midfield line, and the defence hasn't stepped up yet, and that is because that ball is live, and that is a available pass for that player to get his head up who's about to receive the ball and play. Once this player then drops in, it's actually Colwill that follows him out. Again, this isn't the worst thing because he is keeping that ball closed in a position where that player cannot play forwards. But as soon as that ball goes backwards, Colwill has to return, and it takes him too long to do this. It's too slow. And Nkunku as well, he doesn't get out to pressure the ball, which means this ball is now live because there's no pressure on the ball and Cole is out of position, which means that ball is much easier to get in behind that back line, and this is where Chelsea's problems start to stem. This scenario, Reece is just too late to step out. Madueke, again, he's worrying about that left back who's pushed up outside of him on the right, so he's more worried about dropping off and stopping that angle, but Reece, again, he's just too slow to come out with Vinicius, and that allows him to get on the ball and face forwards and turn infield. But, as I said earlier, there is some very good signs in that early man-to-man press, especially from goal kicks, where we're managing to force them to go long. And then, as I said earlier, we're trying to force that so that we can deal with the ball and regain possession. And this is actually something that is working, and you can see this through multiple reps, and continuing to do this is actually going to pay off in dividends. Having said that, not long after that play, it comes to this one where Rudiger is able to just drive the ball forward, and again, Nkunku's not able to put enough pressure on the ball, which means, again, Rudiger is now in a position to play a live pass over the top, and it is making this Madueke-James dynamic, especially with the left-back pushed up nice and high against Madueke and Vinicius with Reece James. It's making it extremely hard for them to deal with. So the main factors when we're talking about these out-of-possession issues is, of course, that when we go man-to-man, you're basically leaving these back three 1v1 when Colwill or Badiashile, whichever one of them steps out with their man, you're going to leave them 1v1. And again, from goal kicks, this isn't too bad because if that ball's going to go long, usually those defenders are going to be better equipped unless you're playing against a really target man specialist striker like an Erling Haaland. They're going to be better equipped to deal with that long ball. However, that problem comes when you don't reset and you don't go back into a zonal shape where this 4-1-4-1 in a zonal shape is set by a certain player in the trigger. So the people that I've highlighted on screen here are the ones that I think were at least the bigger issues in the game the other day out of possession. Madueke, although he looked a bit leggy, he has clearly been learning the role where he has to drop in as that right wing back at times, whereas on the opposite side, Sterling doesn't seem to do it, and he doesn't do it with as much intensity even when he does. So he, in that sense, is an issue for me when we go down that side of the pitch. Nkunku, the reason I've highlighted him in a different colour is because I think that this is one of the most important roles on the pitch in terms of the pressing. Last season, it was done on the opposite side, often by Dewsbury Hall and sometimes by Ndidi. But that player is often, if you're in a zonal set, going to set the trigger, and when they jump out, that is often the trigger for everybody else to jump with them. And Nkunku, in my opinion, isn't doing this with enough intensity currently. And he's playing very well apart from that, but it is causing a few rifts out of possession. Again, Reece James, I think he's just slightly on the leggy side. There was a few times where he tried to jump out and it just wasn't as quick as it needed to be. Sometimes he's just looking, like I say, a little bit leggy, a little bit not in physical peak condition. And it has cost Chelsea a few times in behind, especially down that right-hand side. And then I've also highlighted Enzo Fernandez. Again, I don't think he's actually been too bad out of possession, but I think it's important to notice that that's not his strengths, and he doesn't do it, again, with as much intensity between the lines. Sometimes he's having to follow midfielders making runs behind Gusto and Badiashile, and it just isn't really his game to be going end-to-end in that fashion. To finish off with, it's just important to talk about the goal. Again, this one, Reece James, late to jump out. They drive infield, and then that ball in behind. Badiashile has stepped up. Gusto's playing them onside anyway, even if the run is picked out a little tiny bit later. But it was a well-timed run from Real Madrid in behind. It's actually an amazing pass, so you have to give the credit for that too. But again, just a little bit of a poor communication between Reece jumping out and then Badiashile and Colwill not closing that line quicker and dropping the line when that ball becomes live. Same again here, more just issues and just a few mistakes in this play. Reece just isn't putting enough pressure on the ball. Probably worried that Vinicius is going to skip round him either side. So he's wary and he's dropped off a little bit. Vinicius plays a lovely weighted pass. Again, Colwill and Badiashile should be dropping slightly because if Reece isn't pressuring the ball, this ball is technically a live ball and there's places where they can play that ball. You can see where they're stepping up slightly too far, playing that ball in behind. Even so, Jorgensen should do better and he should be out to clear that. And again, I think that will be sharper when the season starts. But again, it's more mistakes. And again, it's just about pressuring that ball when it becomes live. So what did you make of Real Madrid's 2-1 win over Chelsea? Let me know down in the comments down below. We will have a stream out tomorrow, I believe, that is talking about the Inter Milan preview. That will be the final pre-season game before Chelsea face Manchester City in the Premier League. Let me know any questions you have down below. Drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already.